I want to go over the book of Revelation. I really want to get into it, but there are some things that need to be cleared up beforehand. There have been some strong misconceptions about what has been going on for the past 2,000 years. Okay, Luke 21 sounds a lot like Matthew 24, sounds a lot like Mark 13. The fact is, it's a different prophecy. Luke 21:6. As for these things which you are looking at the temple, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another which will not be torn down. They questioned him, saying, Teacher, when therefore will these things happen? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? And he said, See to it that you are not misled. For many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. See that? He told them, I'm not coming right away. When they tell you the time is near, don't believe them. People act like everybody thought he was coming immediately. Not the case. He actually informed them, when they say the time is near, don't go after them, because it's not true. When you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end does not follow immediately. Then he continued by saying to them, Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes, and in various places plagues and famines, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you to the synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. It will lead to an opportunity for your testimony, so make up your minds not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves, for I will give you utterance and wisdom which none of your opponents will be able to resist or refute. But you will be betrayed by parents, even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name. Yet not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your lives. Note that. That's very important. Not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your lives. Understand that, because all of the apostles went through these events, and they all died. Right? They were all murdered. But not a hair of their head perished. You've got to understand that, because it's not taught clearly or emphatically anymore that what Jesus accomplished on the cross was victory over death. Death is conquered for us. When we say that we'll be spared from tribulation, and God has spared us from wrath, he's clearly not talking about this life, especially in the book of Revelation with the bowls of wrath. That's one temporary, very short period of time on one generation throughout all of history. That's what Jesus accomplished on the cross? No, not rescuing us from that wrath. He rescued us from the wrath of eternal condemnation, from eternal burning. That's the wrath he's talking about, because that's the wrath that every man is saved from the beginning to the end. Clearly, when we die on this earth, not a hair on our head will perish. Nothing happened to us when we give up our last breath. That's not what we're taught anymore. We have reverted back to fear of death, which effectively cancels out the gospel to the powers and rulers and authorities. When we fear death, we are telling death that you still have power over me, which is a very serious implication towards what your faith is all about, you know? I know it's difficult. All of this is difficult. Nobody ever said this would be easy. But we do need to try our best and pray for grace to be confident and to stand firm, and even go to our deaths. We already died, all right? If we die, it's nothing. It is nothing. It seems, you know, Old Testament, mourning is clearly a good thing. But our reality is different. Things have changed. So it seems good to keep that in mind as we go through life, and that will enable us to confidently proclaim the gospel even to death. Okay, so when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those who are in the midst of the city must leave, and those who are in the country must not enter the city, because these are days of vengeance, so that all things which are written will be fulfilled. Woe to those who are pregnant, and those who are nursing, and babies in those days, for there will be great distress upon the land, and wrath to this people. and they will fall by the edge of the sword, and they will be led captive into all the nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. We are not in the church age. We are in the times of the Gentiles. Okay, this is how it went down. According to Josephus, the reason I believe this is because he was not a Christian. He was not fighting for the cause. He was, if anything, against the Christian Jews and the early Gentile church, right? And he said these things happened with no motive behind his words as far as fulfilling prophecy. So I believe it for that reason. Even though Josephus apparently is not the most reliable source, he's all we got. There will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Back then, Josephus reports that there were portents all over the place. There was a star, a comet, a meteor, something in the heavens, in the sky above Jerusalem for 1 year, 12 months, that looked like a sword, just hanging in the sky above it. And everybody saw it. I'll probably miss a couple. There were quite a few. There was a time right before the destruction of Jerusalem where the gate swung open on its own, and it took a whole group of men to get it back in place. This thing was so heavy it could never possibly have moved on its own, and the thing opened wide. Also, the priests were bringing a lamb in to be sacrificed. It gave birth. That's pretty odd for that to happen. There was a man running around crying out woes for I think three years or 3.5 years, something like that, non-stop, just like in this trance, and nobody knew what the deal was with him. They thought he'd lost his mind, and in the end he committed suicide, I believe. You really need to go check out that whole account of what went down back then. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies and recognize that her desolation is near. Okay, that's not the Romans. Apparently, surrounding Jerusalem in the clouds, there was a great army battling in the clouds, and everybody saw it, and the Christians took off. They remembered, they went, wait, we gotta go now, because they saw Jerusalem surrounded by armies, so they did just what he said. They fled to the mountains, and they left the city, and the ones in the country didn't go back in. And there was actually 2 points before the main siege where Christians had opportunity to get out. And okay, according to a guy who did a report in I don't know, 1000 AD or something like that, he says that there was not one report found of any Christian dying in the entire siege of Jerusalem. I think it was 2 million Jews died during that period, but not one Christian perished because they heeded the warnings of their Lord. So whether or not that is true, I don't know. I would believe it because that was the purpose of it. It's a warning. We got to listen. You see, if you listen, God takes care of you. I'm not all for keeping your life on this earth, but the fact was he had a church to build. He had things to do, and he wanted them alive. So he kept them alive. Clearly, this is a siege on Jerusalem, and they did fall by the edge of the sword. They were led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem has been trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. When are they fulfilled? Was it in 1948? It's hard to say because as we understand it now, it is the Jews who are true Jews that should be there in order for the time of the Gentiles to be fulfilled, since we live in this opposite land. You know, you remember when you first started getting into the faith and you suddenly realized this whole world is backwards. Everything they taught me was good is actually bad, and everything they say is bad is actually good. If you continue that in prophecy, things make a lot more sense. I'm not saying that's guaranteed for this exact prophecy here, but in general, it works to your benefit in a great way. Problem is, going today in modern teachings, we tend to cancel that out at a certain point. And, you know, we say we've come to the higher knowledge, now all of this is how it is, when actually that good for bad and bad for good actually continues to the end, apparently. Regardless of the fact that the Jews are there now and Jerusalem has been reborn, and Israel has been reborn as a nation. The city is divided in 4 parts, and there are most certainly Gentiles filling that place. And as we know, Temple Mount is currently a very disputed location and being trampled by all peoples. I'd say we're still in the time of the Gentiles, but we do need to know that that is a separate prophecy. That was for them. They got their own specific. It's not all about us. There will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on earth dismay among nations, and perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting from fear and the expectation of the things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. What's interesting is you get this double, because Luke 21, as we know, has fooled many people because it looks just like Mark and Matthew. When you see these things taking place, these things will take place, but others will also take place. Notice there's no abomination of desolation mentioned in here. He skips that whole section. With that understanding of being in the time of the Gentiles and Jerusalem being trampled underfoot until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled, that may change the way we view the book of Revelation chapter 11. There are many ways this could go. I'm not saying I have the answer. Personally, I think we should view it both ways, just so we don't get into the position of going, see, we can't be in that time because that hasn't happened yet. There was given me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the court which is outside the temple and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, the Gentiles, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. So you could see how this 42 months may mean something entirely different, right? This could be a totally separate deal. I don't know for sure. I'm just pointing these things out to keep it all in mind. And if you can figure out a way that 42 months can equal 2,000 years or so, please tell me, because I don't have all the answers. I just want to know how. I want to know the truth. You know, I want to know what it really means. It is possible that Jerusalem is being trampled underfoot for 42 months that are a lot more than 42 months as we know them, and that the witnesses come and prophesy for 1260 days only. If anybody has any insight into where that could possibly go, and if there's any certain way to determine what these things mean, please let me know and everyone else, because we're just floundering around in the water here. The comforting part is that Jesus Christ will come after all these things take place. That is our hope, and I think that's part of the confusion in this book of Revelation, is so that we don't rely on our knowledge. I'm not saying do not study that. Please study all of this. The more you know, the more firm in your faith you will be. But I'm saying don't put your faith in your understanding of this book, because there are many possibilities, and none of our explanations are certain at all, you know? So we've got to rely on the King coming back. That's where our hope lies, in this rapture after all this tribulation and false messiahs come.